one of New York's most luxurious restaurants. The grand dining hall glowed under the soft city lights streaming through the windows. The clinking of silverware against fine porcelain plates filled the air, creating an atmosphere of quiet elegance. Dining here wasn't just about enjoying a meal, it was a symbol of prestige. That night, the Trump family had arrived for a private dinner. As soon as Barron Trump entered, whispers spread through the restaurant. People recognized him instantly: his tall frame, his composed posture, and the familiar, slightly reserved expression on his face. Barron had grown up under constant public scrutiny. He was used to the stares, the murmurs, the curious glances. It didn't faze him anymore, but that night, something unusual was about to happen. A quiet man, a powerful request. The waiter approaching the table looked like any other staff member. His black and white uniform was neat, though a closer look revealed the fabric was slightly worn. His shoes, however, were polished to perfection, a sign of the pride he took in his job. As he carefully set a glass of water in front of Barron, he hesitated. His hands trembled slightly. He stood there for a moment, uncertain. Barron noticed. He glanced up at the waiter, his expression calm but curious. "Is there something you want to say?" he asked, his voice polite but puzzled. The waiter's face reddened slightly. He knew he wasn't supposed to speak to customers beyond the usual pleasantries, but this wasn't just any customer. He took a deep breath, his fingers tightening around the tray. "I know I'm not supposed to do this," the waiter began hesitantly. "But I have a request." Barron raised his eyebrows slightly. "Go ahead." The waiter hesitated for a moment longer, then reached into the pocket of his jacket and pulled out an old, slightly faded photograph. He gently placed it on the table. In the photo, a young woman was smiling warmly. Her eyes sparkled with kindness, and the dimples on her cheeks deepened with her radiant expression. Though the picture had aged, her presence still felt alive. This is my mother," the waiter said, his voice shaking slightly. "I lost her last year. Cancer." The restaurant's dim lighting cast soft shadows, but Barron could still see the unshed tears in the man's eyes. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. People always assumed he lived a life of luxury, untouched by grief. But he understood loss. The waiter glanced down at the photo, his fingers gently tracing the edges of the worn paper. "She admired you, Mr. Trump," he continued. "Whenever she saw you on the news, she'd say, 'That boy is going to change the world one day.' She had this special fondness for you. I never really understood why, but she always talked about watching you grow up." Barron felt something tighten in his chest. He wasn't used to hearing things like this. Most people either criticized him or were simply fascinated by the fact that he was Donald Trump's son. But this was different. The waiter swallowed hard. "Can I ask you something?" he said quietly, almost as if afraid of the answer. Barron nodded. "Of course." The waiter's eyes glistened with emotion. "Would you say a prayer for her? Just once. Just mention her name and remember her. That would mean everything to me." Barron took a slow breath. This was unexpected. He had received all kinds of requests before: photos, handshakes, even business favors, but this was something different. "Of course," Barron said softly. "What was her name?" "Angela." For a moment, the noise of the restaurant faded into the background. Conversations continued. Silverware clinked, glasses clattered. But in Barron's mind, the only thing that mattered was this moment. He placed his hand over his heart, closed his eyes, and lowered his head slightly. "For Angela, may she rest in peace, and may you always feel her love." A single tear rolled down the waiter's cheek. Barron opened his eyes and looked at him. The gratitude in the man's face was beyond words. After that night. Before leaving the restaurant, Barron left a small note on the table along with something more. His phone number. "You can reach out to me anytime. People never truly lose the ones they love." Days passed, then weeks. One morning, Barron's phone buzzed with a message. It was from the waiter. I just wanted you to know, after that prayer for the first time, I felt at peace. I felt like my mother was truly at rest. That night wasn't just another dinner for me, it was a miracle. Barron held his phone tightly. At that moment, he understood something. Sometimes the greatest impact doesn't come from grand gestures or powerful speeches. Sometimes it comes from a simple moment of remembrance. And perhaps that night, it wasn't just a prayer being spoken. It was a mother, a son, and a stranger. 3 lives intertwining in one quiet, unforgettable moment.